The night of April 13th, 1973, started like every girl's prom night should. At the time, I was 17, a junior in high school, in a small town in Kansas. I had spent that entire afternoon in front of a mirror in my bedroom, getting ready. I was super nervous and excited. I wanted things to go well with my date, David. He showed up right on time, driving his dad's pickup, and politely introduced himself to my parents. He looked sharp in his rented tux. We then drove to the prom after promising my father that I'd be back by 10:30. Our prom was being held in our school's gymnasium. The place was decked out with paper stars hanging from the ceiling, a spinning disco ball, popular during that era, and a live band playing Elton John cover songs. Everyone was there, cheerleaders, football players, and even the misfits who sat in the back of the class. David and I danced to the first few songs, laughing together as he stepped on my toes. But the good times didn't last long. You see, David was normally a good guy when he was sober. But after he came back from hanging out with a couple of his buddies near the back, his eyes were already glassy. His breath was sharp with whatever had been in the flask they had snuck in. He pulled me toward one of the side hallways, saying that he wanted to talk. The hallway was dim, lined with folding chairs and extra decorations. He backed me against the wall, hands on my waist. "Come on, babe," he slurred, leaning in close. I pushed him away. "No, David, stop." When he didn't listen, I slapped him across the face, hard. His expression then twisted in anger. "I knew I was wasting my time with you. You can find your own fucking ride home." He then stormed off toward the parking lot. I stood there, shaking, tears welling up at my eyes. The music kept thumping through the walls like nothing had happened. I didn't want to go back out to the dance floor, looking like I had been crying. So I headed for the restroom. However, the main hallway ones were out of order. So instead of going to the ones attached directly to the gym, I went further down the hall, to the locker rooms. It was quiet back there. The music seemed to fade away the closer I got to the door. Once inside, the atmosphere was very tense. I could tell something was wrong. I then noticed something on the floor, near the bathroom stalls. Since it was dark, I couldn't tell what it was until I got closer. It was a trail of blood that began near one of the lockers leading to one of the bathroom stalls at the far end, like someone had been dragged across the floor. At first, I remember thinking that a girl student might be having some trouble with her lady parts. Hello? Is someone in there? Are you okay?" I was met with silence, but then the stall door began slowly creaking open. Before I could say anything else, a figure wearing a bright yellow rain poncho stepped out. In his right hand, he held a long, serrated knife. Without a word, the assailant charged at me. I bolted, running toward the exit. I felt the blade cut my left arm, but I didn't stop as I shoved through the door, screaming as I burst back onto the dance floor, clutching my bleeding arm. Everyone was staring at me. I spotted our principal near the chaperone table and pushed through the crowd to get to him. "Help! There's someone in the locker room. He attacked me." The rest of that night is a bit of a blur for me. The loss of blood and the shock caused me to pass out. I remember waking up later in a hospital room next to my mother. From talking with some of my friends, after I passed out, the band stopped playing, and the principal grabbed the microphone, asking for someone to call the police and for all the students to exit the gym in an orderly fashion. The police arrived a short time later. They searched the entire building, locker rooms, showers, hallways, even the parking lot. But the man in the poncho was gone. No body, no knife. just a trail of blood pooling in the bathroom stall. By morning, the news hit. A senior girl named Melissa was missing. She had been seen leaving the dance early, upset, heading toward the back of the building. No one saw her after that. Search parties combed the entire area for days. The local parks, nearby creeks, even the railroad tracks. But she was never found. Many years later, I read about a man named John Henry Horton. He was a custodian at Shawnee Mission East High School, which is in the next county over from the school I attended. Horton had been arrested for murdering a female student back in 1974. I felt ice rushing down my veins. The photos from his trial showed an older man, heavier, graying. But his eyes looked familiar to me. I'm convinced it was him who attacked me in the locker room back in 1973. The police have never connected it officially, and I feel horrible that I can't even remember the missing girl's last name. But as far as I'm aware, she was never found, and John Henry Horton was only ever convicted for murdering 13-year-old Elizabeth Wilson. September 11th, 2001 is a day that went down in history for not only America, but for the entire world. Even here in Canada, we felt the impact of that event. But personally, that day stands out for an entirely different reason. At the time I was 12 years old, living in the Alberta countryside, where the biggest excitement was spotting a moose on the back roads. I'd woken up that day and decided that I didn't want to go to school, so I put on a severe cough and rubbed my eyes extra hard to make them look puffy. Then I told my mom I was feeling sick. She bought it, probably because Dad was out of town, and she had her hands full at the pharmacy she was working at. I stayed in bed until I heard her car leaving the driveway. As soon as she was gone, I slipped on my boots and jacket, then snuck out the back door. The woods behind our neighborhood stretched on for miles. I've explored them hundreds of times before, building forts and pretending I was the Canadian Indiana Jones, eh? That morning, I figured I'd hike up the old creek bed, maybe skip some rocks. I must have wandered further than usual, following a deer trail that twisted deeper into the thicket. The trees got denser, blocking out the sun. Everything became quiet. Too quiet. No birds chirping, no squirrels rustling. That's when I saw them. A series of tents. Not the colorful camping ones you would see at the park. These were big, white, industrial looking, like the ones you see in disaster movies. They were clustered together in a clearing, maybe a dozen of them, with thick plastic sheeting and metal frames, hoses snaked between them, connected to generators humming low. It looked like a makeshift quarantine site. Curious, I crept closer, heart pounding like a drum inside my chest. There were these crates stacked outside one tent, labeled with words that I didn't understand. A weird smell hung in the air, like bleach mixed with something rotten. I peeked around the tree, and that's when I saw them. 2 men in full hazmat suits, the kind with hoods and masks. They were hauling a heavy bag between them. One of them turned to look at me. All 3 of us froze in place. Then I heard muffled shouting. They then dropped the bag and reached for their waists, pulling out handguns. The first shot cracked through the air, splintering bark off the tree beside me. I yelped, ducking low as another bullet whizzed past, thudding into the dirt. Panic overwhelmed me. I bolted, crashing through the underbrush, branches whipping at my face. My lungs burned, legs pumping as fast as I could. More shots rang out behind me. I ran until my sides ached. I collapsed behind a fallen log, gasping, tears streaming down my face. I hid there for hours, shaking, until the sun started dipping low. I then made my way back home. Later on, when Mom came back, I didn't say a word. How could I? Beside the fact that she would have been upset about me being out in the forest when I should have been sick in bed. What happened in New York that day had her glued to the TV. It sounded crazy, even to me. That night, as I laid in bed, staring up at the ceiling, replaying it all in my mind, the tents, the suits, the guns, I overheard my mom on the phone in the living room. She was talking to my dad. "Yeah, I heard about it when I was at work. Just awful. James stayed home today because he was feeling sick." After talking to my dad for a while longer, she mentioned something very strange. Apparently she passed about 8 garbage trucks going the opposite way on the 2-lane highway that leads directly to our neighborhood. The only other thing that way is a public park. Dump sites aren't anywhere near this area. A chill crawled up my spine. 8 garbage trucks coming from the direction of the woods? Years later, I tried to look into it, but nothing ever came up. No reports, no investigations, nothing. The only thing anyone was interested in back then was the attack on the World Trade Center. I am in no way suggesting that what I encountered in the woods had anything to do with that event. I'm not really sure what the hell was going on back there, but it was important enough to shoot at a kid and then pack everything up into garbage trucks and leave as quickly as possible. My name is Maddie. This story takes place when I was around 12 or 13. I've listened to this channel for years, but I never thought I would actually sit down and write out what happened to me. I'm from a fairly well-known small town in New Jersey. Growing up, I went through all the typical fangirl phases: Big Time Rush, Justin Bieber, One Direction, 5 Seconds of Summer, but the band that I was completely obsessed with at the time was Why Don't We? My mom has always been the super involved type. She tends to get into whatever I'm into, so she started listening to their music as well. As a surprise, my mom and dad saved up and bought tickets to see the group perform at the Radio City Music Hall in New York City. I was ecstatic. I picked out my outfit, which was a band t-shirt with pink denim shorts. I could barely contain myself. When the day came, I was scrambling to get ready. 13-year-old me genuinely believed one of the boys would spot me in the crowd of millions of girls and fall in love. We lived about 2 hours away, without traffic, and since my mom hates driving into the city, we decided to take the bus instead. We were already running late. The bus stop was about 25 minutes from our house, so we sped there, blasting Why Don't We songs along the way, laughing and singing together. We arrived just in time and rushed on board. Because we were the last ones on, all the seats were taken, except the last 2 rows, and I took the window, while my mom sat in the aisle seat. As the bus was about to pull out, I suddenly caught a horrible stench creeping in from the front. I looked up and saw a ragged man, maybe in his late 60s or early 70s. His clothes were filthy and torn, and he carried a plastic bag that seemed to be adding to the smell. He looked homeless, and when he smiled, I saw his teeth. Yellow, broken, and rotting. Since the bus was full, the only available seat left was directly behind my mom and I. As he walked down the aisle, his eyes scanned the passengers, then locked on me. Now, I've always been a true crime junkie, even as a kid, so the second he stepped on the bus, I was on high alert. I noticed where he sat, right behind me, and I couldn't help but glance back at him. He must have noticed, because our eyes met. Something in his expression changed. He then leaned toward my mom's ear. "Your daughter is so beautiful. I'm going to marry her when we get off this bus." he whispered. My stomach turned. I felt his hand gripping the seat behind me, his fingers tightening until the metal creaked. I only had one earbud in, but I heard every word. My mom froze. What could she even do? She's only 4'11". We exchanged a quick glance, and she shook her head, silently telling me not to react. We whispered about how creepy it was, and decided just to ignore him. She asked for one of my AirPods to tune out his disgusting comments. For a while, he just muttered to himself, and we tried to push it out of our minds, focusing on the excitement of the concert. Halfway through the ride, my mom pulled out her phone to take selfies of us. She literally takes pictures of everything. She's the kind of person that would take pictures of a rock. But as she held the phone up, I noticed something at the top of the screen. The man had leaned forward, practically pressing his face between our seats to get in the picture. I panicked and tried to whisper a warning, but before I could, my mom saw him on the screen and yelped. She shot up from her seat. The man just sat there, laughing this awful, manic laugh. While the nearby passengers turned to look, I remember feeling frozen, terrified for both of us, and even for the woman who was sitting across from him. He eventually stopped laughing and sank back into his seat, mumbling under his breath. No one said a word. They never do. And my mom and I just sat there, tense and silent. I texted her instead of speaking, telling her how scared I was, and she replied telling me to stay calm and just ignore him for a while longer. 15 minutes later, I started to relax some more. We hadn't heard anything from the man behind us. That was until I felt something hot on the right side of my neck. I jerked forward and looked back. The man was leaning so close that his face nearly touched the gap between the seats. Your daughter is so perfect. I'm going to have a family with her. My mom spun around and stood up, her voice shaking, but was loud enough for the whole bus to hear. She's only 12 years old. Leave her alone, and don't speak to us again. For a second, I thought I was going to lunge at her, but thankfully he didn't. He just sank back down, now silent. When we finally neared our stop, I felt a wave of relief. I thought it was over. As people began filing off the bus, my mom and I had our stuff ready. We were immediately expecting to hop off. But right before we did, I felt him lean in close again, his voice low and disturbingly cheerful. As soon as we get off this bus, I'm going to rape your daughter. I felt every drop of blood drain from my body. I couldn't breathe. My mom's face went pale in pure terror. I started praying in my head, even though I'm not very religious. I just wanted to get out of there. As soon as there was enough space between us and him, we booked it. We ran off that bus as fast as we could and sprinted down the street, desperate to disappear into the crowd. We ducked into a nearby boutique store, crouching behind the racks of clothing. Through the glass, we saw him limping down the sidewalk, peering into the windows, searching for us. When he looked into our store, I held my breath, but thank God he didn't spot us. We waited another 15 minutes before slipping out and finding a security guard who walked us the rest of the way. The rest of that night went by without seeing him again, but the fear has stayed with me ever since. To any young girls hearing this, please be aware of your surroundings. I used to listen to scary stories thinking, that could never happen to me, but it did. It can happen to anyone. I've been a long-time listener and a huge fan of your channel. I wanted to share a true story from my junior year of college. During the COVID-19 lockdowns, when campuses were letting only a handful of students back in. But since I was an RA, I was chosen to return. The campus was mostly desolate, but I didn't mind it. My school owns a stretch of forest where the trails began on private property, but eventually fed into public pathways. To avoid feeling trapped in my dorm, I would go for long walks there. It was winter, and the trails were frozen. A river ran alongside the walking trail, its surface sealed over with ice. The trails were typically empty, and I would usually have my headphones in, music blasting. But I still tried to stay aware of my surroundings. After all, I'm an avid horror story listener. I don't know exactly how long the trail is, but toward the end, there's a bench. During the springtime, students would gather there to swim. For me, the bench served more as a landmark. It meant that the trail was about to get more narrow and elevated, with the river running stronger beside it. Even during winter, you could still see the water moving beneath the thin layer of ice. The trail eventually ended in a parking lot, and as I got closer, I saw someone. At first, there was nothing unusual about him. He looked to be normal, maybe late 30s, early 40s, white, with a beanie, denim jeans, and a light-colored jacket on. Nothing about his appearance screamed dangerous in the moment, but the second I saw him, my stomach tightened. Something in me just reacted out of pure instinct. I didn't want to be near this person, alone, on an isolated trail. So I discreetly lowered my music and kept moving toward the lot. He passed me, and I let out a quiet sigh of relief. Perhaps I was just talking myself into a worst-case scenario. Since I had to walk back the same way I came, I waited for a while so the man could get far enough ahead so I wouldn't end up right behind him. When I finally started walking again, I kept my pace slow. I told myself I was overthinking this whole ordeal, too many horror stories in my head. But everything changed when I got back to the bench. He was sitting there, seemingly waiting for me. This was the middle of winter, freezing cold, and he was just sitting there. I didn't say anything to him. I just kept moving forward, but after a short while, I risked a casual glance over my shoulder. My stomach dropped. He was now walking behind me. I still had a long way to go before I'd reach the campus, and all I could think was, I can't run. Running would only alert him that I knew he was following me. Plus, the trail is covered in frost. If I tried to sprint, I might slip, and then I'd be done for. So instead, I quickened my pace, forcing myself not to look back too much. Normally, I carried either my X-Acto blade or my heavy hydro flask for protection. But on that day, of course, I had left both behind. I cursed myself under my breath. Sometimes there would be other people on the trail, but since this was a lockdown period, it was just me and him. No one else. I debated calling campus security, or even a friend, but all I could do was focus on just making it back. I think my stalker noticed I was picking up pace, because when I glanced back again, he let out this low chuckle. That sound made me shiver, more so than the cold weather. I was nearing the campus portion of the trail when I saw a woman with a huge dog coming in the opposite direction. I can't describe the relief that washed over me. I was ready to tell her that the man was following me and that she should go get some help or sick her dog on him. But when I turned around once more, he was gone. Just like that, out of thin air. I didn't waste any time. There were 3 separate entrances from the campus to the trail, and I darted up the closest one, cutting straight for the dorms. Even as I walked back to my room, I kept glancing over my shoulder, my nerves still on edge. Honestly, if that woman and her dog hadn't shown up, I think he would have continued following me, and if he had made a move, I don't think I could have done much about it. Once inside, I called the campus security, trying to report a strange man on campus, but they just brushed it off and said that they would send someone to go check it out, and then hung up without even asking for a description. The scariest part of this was the feeling of being trapped. Not being able to run, knowing that he was right behind me. When I called my parents and told them, they just scolded me, telling me that I shouldn't be walking in the woods alone. Young girls go missing all the time in those situations. Funny enough, that didn't stop me from going back on the trails. But after that day, I never left without my X-Acto blade in my pocket. I've attached a short video showing what the frozen path and river looked like that winter, as well as a photo I took at the end of the trail in the parking lot. I only recently realized that the photo actually captures the man who ended up following me. Though he's tiny and blurry, you can spot him if you zoom in close enough.